Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Inflation Reduction Act Town Hall. My name is Angela Xu, and I am the Municipal Engagement Manager with the Illinois Environmental Council. First, a big thank you to our amazing co-hosts, the offices of Senator Tammy Duckworth and Representative Bob Morgan. And thank you to our guest speakers, Jenny from GoGreen Highland Park and Chris from GoGreen Deerfield. I do want to go over some housekeeping. Attendees are automatically muted upon entry to the webinar. We will have a moderated question and answer session following this webinar, so if you have any questions for our presenters today, please feel free to type it into the chat. Our informational town hall will share a lot of information, but please rest assured that this recording will be shared with you. And so next, I will go ahead and get started on a few facts about the Illinois Environmental Council. So we were founded in 1975, and we're a nonprofit that has worked to safeguard Illinois, the people, plants, and animals and natural systems on which all life depends by building power for people and the environment. We advocate for over 150 environmental organizations operating in the state, and we carry out our mission through equitable public policies that create these healthy environments through collaboration, building power, and advocacy. So through coalition building, legislator outreach, and policy advocacy, we work in 6 issue areas, including agriculture, conservation, clean energy, transportation, clean water, and zero waste. So this was the largest legislation and investment in clean energy history in the nation. And it was signed into law in 2022, and we've taken this action on climate change to give money directly to the people. These are once-in-a-generation federal investments projected to achieve up to 40% reduction in climate pollution by 2030. And we're already seeing these positive impacts of climate-friendly projects across the country, creating 271,000 good clean energy jobs. Now, we cannot talk about the IRA without first mentioning CEJA, the 2021 Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. And it is also a very equitable clean energy jobs bill of its kind, the first in the nation. And you will learn today how CEJA laid the groundwork for the IRA and made federal funding opportunities possible in Illinois. So first, let's look into the programs. This image does not comprehensively cover everything under the IRA, but it is a few of the buckets of funding that we'll talk about today in our presentation. So for example, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, under which we have the US EPA Solar for All program. We have the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant that my friend and collaborator Thomas Mosley will talk about today. We also have the Rural Energy for America program, and really important environmental climate justice programs under the IRA that provide these climate community change grants. And then in addition to these program areas, we also have tax credits, reductions, and rebates. And what's really important for municipalities and nonprofits is something called elective pay. So starting off with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, it is a US EPA program that provides financing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for communities. These can be used to create state or city green banks. And green banks are an important source of low-cost capital for emerging clean tech sectors in a state. And under CEJA, the Green Bank in Illinois was created. The Illinois Finance Authority, or the IFA, was authorized to establish the Illinois Climate Bank, allowing for the state to apply for IRA programs. So as you can see, this is huge. Within the GGRF is a $14 billion National Clean Investment Fund competition. And so Illinois, the IFA, was awarded $5 billion as a sub-awardee. We'll see that announcement right here. So it's actually really exciting. $156 million were awarded to the IFA to deliver residential solar, to lower energy costs, and advance environmental justice. And additionally, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, or the CPRG. So Illinois Environmental Council and the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition have been working very hard to ensure that these program policies are being rolled out in an equitable and accessible way. And again, this is a program from the US EPA. It provides assistance to states, local governments, and MSAs, or metropolitan statistical areas, to implement policies that achieve or facilitate climate pollution reduction. And very exciting, we had the great news this summer that Illinois was awarded $430 million for these community-driven solutions to cut climate pollution. Next, the Environmental and Climate Justice Program funds financial assistance and technical assistance programs that benefit underserved and overburdened communities. Congress appropriated $2.8 billion for financial assistance and $200 million for technical assistance. the EPA created on the right, as you can see, the IRA Disadvantaged Communities Map to assist potential applicants. The Community Change Grants are just one such program, and there are $2 billion for environmental and climate justice activities to benefit disadvantaged communities. And what's more, the US EPA also selected 16 environmental justice thriving communities technical assistance centers. That's a mouthful, but we also like to call them EJ Tic Tacs. And they are set to receive $177 million to help underserved communities across the country. So let's say you are interested in applying for a grant and you need technical assistance, you can actually reach out to the Great Lakes Tic Tac or the Blacks and Green Tic Tac, and they're available for you to have that help. Next, there's also a lot of tax credits and deductions under the IRA. So for example, the Clean Energy Investment Tax Credit provides a tax credit for investment in facilities that generate clean electricity. And on top of these credits, we'll also have bonuses or adders. And for example, there's the low-income communities bonus credit and the domestic content bonus credit. So let's say you want to apply to a renewable energy facility that has constructed with a minimum percentage of manufactured components from the United States. That means you can actually get this 10 to 20% bonus for facilities financed by these tax credits. And this is an example. So let's say you use this clean electricity investment tax credit, you have that domestic content adder, and let's say your project is within an energy community. So already there is the 50% credit they can get back from that project. Government entities can, for the very first time, receive a payment equal to the full value of tax credits for building qualifying clean energy projects. You first go through a pre-filing registration through the IRS, and then you can actually claim and receive these payments by making an election on your annual tax return. If you make the investment, you get the money, and these funds are not competitive. And it's also not capped, so that means you can actually keep claiming these credits annually. And the benefit is that these funds are received directly from the IRS and not through local governments. You can also apply for the 12 of the IRA tax credits through elective pay. So this is huge, where if you weren't eligible for these tax credits before, you are now. We also have several home efficiency and appliance rebates helpful to homeowners and renters. And Illinois expects to see the rollout of home energy rebates from the IAPA later next year in 2025. And we're excited to be working closely with them to provide public input to these programs. And also, for example, in effect this year, 2024, the High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Act provides an upfront discount for heat pump costs up to $8,000. The IRA's Energy Efficiency Home Improvement Credit provides up to $2,000 annually and credits to lower the cost of a heat pump installation by 30%. Benefits are also available to local governments, nonprofits, and persons who recently purchased an electric vehicle. If you bought an American-made vehicle starting in 2023, you can get up to a $7,500 tax credit back. And lastly, a really great resource that I want to share with you all is the Climate Program Portal. It was created as a resource to share federal funding updates, so municipal leaders and decision makers can easily make an account, and you can see the data that the portal has pulled together across the state of Illinois. So we can see here from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act that $6 billion has been awarded in the state. And let's say you're looking for resources to start your project or to finance an investment that you are looking into. They also have a finance hub where you can look for that technical assistance and use their resource library. And with that, I want to thank you for listening to our presentation. And I will now pass the microphone over to Representative Bob Morgan.
Thank you so much, Angela. For those of you on the Zoom that have not gotten to know Angela or IEC, it is an incredible honor for us as a state office to have a partner like IEC at the state level who's working on so many different pieces of legislation and monumental changes at the state level to really protect our environment. So I think sometimes we talk about environmental protection or environmental justice and it's nameless, but to me it's not. To me it's specifically IEC and a few of the partners on this call. So I want to thank Angela for that incredible walkthrough. And also to Senator Duckworth's office, Senator Duckworth and her staffer, Thomas, who's going to be here with us following my presentation. So what I'm going to talk about briefly, I'm going to give you three specific bills the state of Illinois has passed. I get a question all the time about what is the state doing with regards to environmental protections and environmental climate change reforms, and how are we protecting our air, water, and soil? And I sometimes get caught up in the idea of thinking of dozens of bills that we are either working on or have passed because there's so much going on. So forgive me that I'm only going to talk about three ones, but they're three really big pieces of legislation that we passed. So I'm going to talk about the Climate Equitable Jobs Act. I'm going to talk about the Carbon Capture Pipeline Act and also the Wetlands Protection Act. So I'll walk through all three and then I'll pass over to our federal partners. I think everyone on the Zoom has heard about and is familiar with CEJA, our Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. Of course, that was really part two of major reforms in Illinois following the very successful Future Energy Jobs Act, FEJA, that was passed in 2016 and became effective in 2017. But CEJA was an incredibly significant piece of legislation, one that was not easy to pass. It had a lot of constituencies, new and old, a lot of thought leaders talking about where are we trying to get to and how are we going to achieve our goals, our environmental goals for the state. And so CEJA's final product was, from my perspective, the product of extraordinary negotiations of groups like IEC and others, and colleagues of mine like Ann Williams and Marcus Evans, Robin Gable, and others, Jay Hoffman in the House, in the Senate, in the governor's office, and a lot of other stakeholders. The focus of CEJA was really about transitioning our prior environmental energy sector into the 21st century and 22nd century, really thinking about the future. So we focused on three things in CEJA. It was decarbonization, so decarb, equity and jobs, which was a huge chunk of what we focused on, and I'll get to that, and then energy affordability. Clean energy transition, the sometimes seeing losing sight of the forest through the trees is something that we do at the legislative level. But at the end of the day, this is about transitioning to clean energy in Illinois and doing it in a way that's setting the path and setting the bar for other states. We're trying to be a leader, not just for ourselves, but for other states to model. So we set a 100% clean energy goal by 2050. 2050, that is, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. It's only 25 years away. And when you really think about how quickly that's going to be here, it means we have a lot of work to do. We had a lot of debate and discussion about that timeline, and also the transition specifically from coal plants. As I think everyone on the Zoom knows, we have been transitioning away from coal plants just through the market, through really organic, moving away from that into other energy transmission and other energy sectors and development. But we really tried to expedite that movement for a variety of really obvious reasons. If our goal is to have a clean environment and a clean planet, we need to transition as quickly as we can away from coal. And so that really was a lot of our debate, discussion, and the hard parts about this bill. So coal plants are to be closed by 2030, gas plants to be reduced and phased out by 2045. So those are, again, 2030, we're 6 years away. Some of those plants were already set to close, and then decommissioning gas plants by 2045. Equity and justice is an incredibly core gravity for the House of Representatives, for the legislature. It drives a lot of what we do. Economic, educational, healthcare opportunities are ones that we're still trying to support and really focus on where we have failed in the past. So focusing on job transitioning. When I think about this, I think about the southeast side of Chicago, where there were steel plants for decades and decades and decades, and they all went away. And all those jobs are gone, and we failed to really help individuals transition into the new energy sector. And that's really what equity and justice pillars really focused on within this legislation. We are, again, providing support for that transition, a lot of educational, vocational focus and training and financial support. Utility accountability. Again, I know I'm preaching the choir on this Zoom, but we also have the Illinois Commerce Commission. We have the Illinois Power Agency. We have a lot of agencies and commissions that monitor our utility usage and costs. but there was a lot of utility accountability included in this legislation. And lastly, environmental justice. Again, it really goes to the core of what we do. And when we pass meaningful, significant, substantive legislation, we have equity and justice at its core. I'll move on to carbon capture pipeline. This passed this year. This is new for the state of Illinois, but something that has been on the horizon for a few years. Again, IEC and others have been leading on this, but we passed really amazing legislation. And you can look at this from a number of ways, but for me, you had a lot of different stakeholders that were involved that had very different interests on this issue that came together to pass a meaningful bill. That means everyone got a little bit of what they wanted. No one got everything what they wanted, but it's moving the state forward as a leader of carbon capture, where we have opportunities based on our infrastructure, based on our energy needs and energy systems in Illinois and structures, but also when we're thinking about the future. CJ is really helping it. I'm sorry, Carbon Capture Pipeline Act is really getting us there. There are three core elements of this. Climate action, economic opportunity, and third, environmental protection. This creates an authorization for the regulation of and construction of carbon dioxide, CO2 pipelines to transfer from industry into underground storage. Apples to apples, we already do this we do water underground storage, and we also do a variety of other gases, natural gas that we're storing in underground pipes, underground storage tanks. This is something the state of Illinois is already well versed in, a lot of infrastructure around, but now we're going to transport carbon and we're going to store carbon. And that's really going to help us in a lot of obvious ways. Establishes rules for those permits. And then we talked and spent a lot of time on safety here. Underground storage tanks are not foolproof. They're not 100% safe all the time, and it requires a lot of regulation and oversight and a lot of monitoring. So before we were going to move in this direction, we wanted to make sure that there were significant monitoring steps required of any kind of CO2 pipeline, protecting those where a pipe is traveling underneath their property, underneath our water and our food resources and our infrastructure, making sure that we're keeping Illinoisans safe. Landowner rights and compensation, again, an area where historically there has been some abuses, thinking in particular windmills and wind farms, making sure that we are protecting consumers and farmers and landowners. Last, the public and environmental safety. This is a novel step for the state of Illinois, a novel step for almost any state to really move towards carbon capture like this. And we really wanted to do it in a way that prioritizes safety, not just now in the first few years, but decades into the future. And the last piece, wetlands protection, something that is really important to my district, for those of you who are not local, having significant wetlands, significant population along Lake Michigan, significant forest preserves, and a lot of public lands. Wetlands is just a really core issue for me and for our district. So here with the Wetlands Protection Act that we passed this year deals with ecological preservation, flood control, which again, I don't really have to explain to anyone here, but the urgency around reducing and mitigating flooding. We have through the state invested quite a bit into flood mitigation and through our stormwater management industry, through a stormwater management agency in Lake County. But a lot of communities are still struggling with this. So we're really, really focusing on this as wetlands are critical to making sure we're reducing flooding. Climate resilience, again, storing carbon, mitigating the impacts of climate change, and all of the real core ways in which wetlands really support our community and protect our environment. There are development restrictions here, which are protecting wetlands, conservation and restoration, wetlands mapping and monitoring, something we have not historically done particularly well with the data that we need to look at the long-term planning here, public and environmental safety, and lastly, enforcement mechanisms. So I went very, very quickly, but I did want to cover those three elements, those three pieces of legislation the state of Illinois has passed in just the last few years, so that you can see we are doing our part. working with our amazing, incredible federal partners and local support like GoGreen Highland Park and GoGreen Deerfield. But next, I'm going to pass it to our friend Thomas Mosley, who's on from Senator Duckworth's office. Thank you, Thomas.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Thomas Mosley. Feel free to call me Nate, but I'm the Suburban Outreach and Grants Coordinator in the U.S. office, or in the Office of U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth. Um, my main issue areas are environment and energy, the Black and African American community, the suburban and collar counties of Illinois, and also arts and humanities. Now, a brief overview of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about first the breakdown of funding on a federal level. We'll have a few geographical examples so that you can understand exactly what's going on in the country, but also in the local areas, in areas that we remember and sometimes go through on a daily basis. We'll have a brief overview of the programs from the Environmental Protection Agency, and then office also what our office will be willing to do to help cities, municipalities, local governments, and organizations that are looking to get funding from these federal agencies. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. These are the AIR programs funded through the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, as you can see, a majority of the funding is in tax credits, as my colleague Angela explained, but I'm going to break down the tax credits a bit. There are two main types of tax credits. There's a production tax credit and there's an investment tax credit. The production tax credit is a per kilowatt credit for electricity generated by solar and other qualifying technology for the first 10 years. After 10 years, they kind of want you to replace this stuff because things get inefficient, as we all know. Same thing with cars, really, too. But you would get a per kilowatt credit for the amount of energy that you save and the reduction of pollution that you're putting into the air. An investment tax credit is a dollar for dollar reduction in the amount of income tax that you would owe otherwise for your investment into clean energy. And it's also upfront. So an example would be, say you were to purchase solar panels. You would get a tax credit basically for the amount that the solar panels cost and also the amount of labor for it to implement the solar panels into your home or business or wherever. From there, you break down the rest of the funding, and the EPA has the next highest amount of money. They're focused on basically reducing climate change or combating climate change, but also focused on many different things through many different grants and programs as well. You have the USDA, which is the Department of Agriculture, focused on green agricultural practices, building out rural communities, and expanding the use of renewable fuels. The Department of Energy is focused on tax credits mainly with wind electricity expansion and also the expansion of electricity transmission lines. With the amount of like conversion from gas to zero emission vehicles, what we really need to do and what a lot of these agencies are focused on is building out charging infrastructure. We have to expand the grid or else it would basically collapse. Um, and then from there, you also have the other agencies. The Department of Interior is focused on addressing drought. That would be more in areas that you would hear like California or Colorado, where, I mean, the Colorado River is basically drying up. So they're very focused on addressing that. The Department of Transportation is mainly focused on converting to zero emission public transportation, which is a big factor out here because we have so much public transportation. Other rural areas, not as much, but the big metropolitan areas like New York, Chicago, DC, all have just a plethora of different ways to get to and from work and commuters, and so many people that use public transportation on a daily. So we focus on that a lot, especially out here. Um, the Department of Commerce is focused on economic development. The U.S. Postal Service is converting a lot of their fleet of postal trucks to zero emission vehicles. And then housing and urban development is really focused on the use of like putting clean energy technology into homes. And without further ado, we are going to next talk about the sectors that the EPA is tackling climate change. There are four different sectors. There are four different strategies that they're taking. The two are sector-based, that's mobile and stationary. When we're talking about mobile, we're talking about simply building out charging infrastructure and zero-emission vehicles. When we're talking about the bottom up, as my amazing colleague, Rep. Bob Morgan was talking about, we're talking about the EJ communities, areas like Waukegan, Zion, the Southeast area, so Calumet, Little Village, etc., areas that have been historically disadvantaged through climate change. And then from the top down, we're talking about big action plans to reduce climate change. I'd say from out here, it would be mainly the metropolitan area, so the Chicagoland area, but also there are a few examples that we'll get into shortly in the next two slides about an organization that was focused on reducing climate change to their own unique way. Next slide, please. So the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. Now, the IRA provides $5 billion to support local greenhouse gas reduction strategies. There's two different programs of competitive and non-competitive. The competitive has the most money, obviously, because everybody's competing for these funds. There's so much money out there, but overall, the EPA really wants to make sure that everything is fair and that people are playing by the rules. So everybody has to compete for them for the most part. That's why a majority of the funding is in competitive implementation grants. A perfect example of somebody that received a competitive implementation grant is the Rebuilding Exchange. They are based in Evanston, Illinois, and they received nearly $4 million for their practice of recycling building materials to construct new homes from the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. Going out there, it was really a great experience. What you would see is basically when you demolish a home, a lot of the different, not tools, but a lot of the different materials would normally either be thrown away or incinerated or whatever. They would take everything from light fixtures to mirrors, to old sinks, toilets, doors, things that you would normally just not think about in terms of recycling, and they would all store them in their facility, and they refurbish them as well, but they store them in the facility and they're available to purchase for anyone that's willing to like go out there. If you're building your own home, or even if you're a contractor that is looking for building materials, this is a great resource, almost like a thrift store for building materials. But overall, I think that was a great event to be at. As you can see, there was Rep. Jan Schakowsky, Senator Durbin made a stop by. The mayor of Evanston was out there as well. And then the EPA administrator for Region 5, Deborah Shore, that's the one on the left in the blue shirt. But overall, I think that was a great event. And that is a great example of how you can impact climate change and get a grant like the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant through your own unique way as an organization. Next slide, please. The Methane Emissions Reduction Program. So there's over 1.5 billion to reduce methane emissions. A unique thing about methane emissions, what they do basically is they create smog for one, and they also reduce hydroxyl radicals. Now, I'm not a scientist, but just through like my small research that I've done, what that does is hydroxyl radicals control the concentration of toxic gases in the air. So if there's methane that's killing the hydroxyl radicals, what it does is it basically lets all these toxic pollutants into the air without any type of restrictions or any type of like checking. So methane is an extreme issue and extremely harmful to our environment. And so we're mainly focused on reducing methane emissions through a plethora of different programs. And these programs are focused on preparing and submitting greenhouse gas reports, monitoring methane emissions, and also reducing methane and other greenhouse gases. Now, the monitoring programs are below the small icons that you see. The first one on the left is the methane emissions program, or the methane monitoring program, focused mainly on just monitoring the amount of methane that is in a specific area. For the heater that you see, that's for a wood heaters program. The wood heaters program, wood heaters actually emit a lot of different methane and other bad chemicals into the air. in communities. Sometimes, they look cute in your home, but at the end of the day, they're doing a lot of damage to our atmosphere. So what they do is there's a program to basically monitor how wood heaters are affecting specific communities that have a lot of wood heaters installed in homes. The air quality index monitoring program, about last year in the summer, um, there were a lot of wildfires up north. I believe they were in Canada. And our area, the smog traveled its way down here. That greatly affected the air quality in our area. As you can see, and there are a lot of people in specifically historically disadvantaged areas and EJ areas that are susceptible and very vulnerable to the air quality being low. And during that time, it was very hard. I'm a runner, so it was very hard to go out and run or even be active. And they were suggesting that you don't even go outside for any type of physical activity because the air quality was so bad. You don't want those pollutants in your lungs. So there are monitoring programs that the EPA has created to overall see the air quality and find ways to make it better. The multi-pollutant program is focused on the different types of pollutants that are in a specific area. And then the fence lining, that's the one on the far right, is focused on measuring pollutants at a property line or manufacturing facility. Next slide, please. Transportation. Chicago being such a big metropolitan area, we have a lot of different ports and transportation. So this is something that the EPA created that our office receives a lot of, but also the city is taking very seriously. With the Clean Ports program, there's over $3 billion invested to ensure the replacement of clean technology and equipment. Overall, we want to create jobs, but we also want to make sure that the people that are working in these freight areas are as healthy as possible and that they're not exposed to these dangerous chemicals and toxic pollutants on a daily basis. Um, Overall, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is the goal, but if we can help all the workers that, with blue collar jobs that really are the backbone of this country, if we can help them not be exposed to these pollutants, then that would be extremely helpful. With the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicles program, think of any heavy duty vehicle from a garbage truck to a school bus, public transportation, et cetera, mainly vehicles that are focused on the road. There are other grants available for programs that are for trains and other things that also emit pollution into the air. But this is mainly focused on heavy duty vehicles that are on the road and converting them to electric and zero emission. Next slide, please. And the last two programs are the environmental and climate justice block grants, but then there's the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is basically it's a combination of a bunch of different grants and they're under a lot of umbrellas. The main one that I think was really cool was the Solar for All program that can specifically impact disinvested communities, low income areas, by converting to solar energy. You'll be able to get a tax credit. You'll also get the production tax credit for the amount of energy that you save. So that's a really great program in itself, and it's available for all states, tribes, municipalities, and nonprofits alike. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is almost similar to the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. It's focused on plans like the Clean Investment or the National Clean Investment Fund, the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator Competition, mainly focused on like climate action plans in a sense. How do we get greenhouse gas emissions reduced, and how do we reverse the negative effects of climate change? For the environmental and climate justice block grants, we're talking about historically disadvantaged areas. A perfect example would be the city of Waukegan and Zion, who had a decommissioned power plant back in the 90s that was ComEd. It employed a lot of people in those areas. When it decommissioned, you saw that the property value, I think, decreased by almost 50%. Employment also decreased, and they are still actually holding a lot of the toxic waste right on the lakeshore, which could potentially affect a lot if the pollutants were ever to enter the water. So that's something that our office is dealing with. The senator introduced the Stranded Act, which was focused on giving communities with decommissioned power plants funding to combat the negative effects that happen when you had decommissioned power plants and how they affected the jobs and the economy of that specific area. But the EPA has many other programs as well, focused on protecting and rebuilding these historically disadvantaged communities. So, as you can see, the federal assistance awarded to Illinois to date is overall, it's over $1 billion awarded to combat climate change, and there's so much more on the way, and we have so much more work to do. That's why we're doing these presentations. We want to get the word out about how much money is coming into the state, the different programs that are available, and how our office is able to help. As you can see, there's over $430 million in CPRG funding, the Solar for All program, whether we're talking about building out the grid, transmission, EV and charging infrastructure, and just vehicles in general. There's just so much going on in Illinois, and Illinois is focused on being one of like the top states that are focused on reducing climate change, but also moving into the next stage of, I guess you would say, life in terms of trying to combat climate change. We understand that this is a serious issue, and our office is very focused on moving forward into the future in terms to zero emission vehicles, et cetera, and just advancing the country overall. So, what our office can do to help. So as I said, we're 100% committed to modernizing the Illinois infrastructure and taking the steps toward the goals in the Inflation Reduction Act. What we can do is, if you are a government, municipality, or nonprofit applying for a federal grant, we can provide a letter of support for the grant. And we can either send it to you or send it directly to the agency. And all you would have to do is click the link below. There's a letter of support form that you have to fill out. Usually it takes 7 to 10 business days to get that out. And I will preface that because a lot of people come to us and they say, yeah, can we get a letter? It's due tomorrow. Can't do that, but we can do it within at least a week. And overall, it's a great way to help and boost your application. For federal grant resources, including a resource guide and tips on grant writing, our office has developed basically a giant packet with a bunch of different resources that are available. There's tips on grant writing in there. There's basically an overview of how the process is going to go, timelines, and the federal government does take a long time to get money out. Just want to throw that out there. But overall, we're very focused on bringing all this money back to Illinois, and we're happy to help in any way we can. If you have any questions, feel free to directly email me at thomas_mosley@duckworth.senate.gov. And then I think there's one more slide that has the emails for the specific EPA grants that are available. And this is being recorded, so you'll be able to go back to it and click on the links and use those emails if necessary. But thank you so much to my colleagues, Angela, Rep. Bob Morgan, and I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That's really valuable information that you shared, and I share your excitement for the Solar for All program and how it can expand at the state level the Illinois Solar for All and Illinois Shines programs. So with that, we will now pass the microphone over to GoGreen Deerfield.
All right, thanks, Angela. Thanks to you and Bob for having us participate in this. It's good to hear about all of this. You know, it's one of the things that got us started. GoGreen Deerfield started really as a local community organization just about 5 or 6 years ago, and we're small. But we're really kind of focused on areas that haven't been talked about yet, and that's the things that are going on locally in our own neighborhoods. You know, there's a lot of environmental organizations out there. You've got Greenpeace, you've got Sierra Club, you've got the Nature Conservancy, but I think a lot of people might not realize that there are a lot of these smaller grassroots kind of organizations in local neighborhoods like GoGreen Deerfield and GoGreen Highland Park that are trying to do things at a much more local level rather than at a state or a federal level. And in many ways, I think those can be just as meaningful and very fulfilling to those of us who want to get involved, who can't do the things that can be done at the state or national level. So GoGreen Deerfield and GoGreen Highland Park are both part of GoGreen Illinois. And as you can see there are a lot of GoGreens in the network in the Chicago area. And we collaborate and communicate with each other, but we're all very independent. We do our own thing. We all have our own agenda. And we kind of set our own goals and our own expectations for the things that we want to do. So we're small. There's only about a dozen of us. Deerfield's not a very big town, but we have more than 50 or 60 people that have worked with us over the years. And we have a larger group of hundreds of people, more than 1,000 people actually, who we communicate with on a regular basis. So on the next slide, I can show you kind of some of the things that we do. We really found very early that we didn't consider ourselves experts in the environment or really have any deep knowledge of this, and it can be kind of intimidating for people when they look at all this. And I think a lot of people who look at this realize how awesome all of these programs are, but it can almost be overwhelming. There's just so much going on. How do I make sense of all of this? So one of the things that we've done is to kind of start very humbly, knowing that we don't know a lot about all of this, but to make ourselves knowledgeable about this so that we can help other people learn about this and take advantage of the opportunities that Senator Duckworth's office and Bob Morgan talked about. So we work with community partners. We work with other organizations like Friends of the Chicago River, Illinois Solar, the CRTI, and the Morton Arboretum that specify in different aspects of conservation in the environment. And then we work with a lot of municipal partners. We work with the local school district. We do a lot of work with the Park District here in Deerfield, and we do a lot of work with the village. And in some ways, we can help them make decisions and do things that can take advantage of these opportunities. And then in other ways, we're just kind of trying to get out there in the community and do things ourselves. And we do a lot of the different things that they talk about. But with the next slide, we do a combination of kind of public outreach. So we have a website, we have a newsletter, we have social media that we use. And we hold a lot of events. So we have farmers markets, yard tours, solar tours, river days. We do a lot of special events where we're out in the community. We're trying to get volunteers to come out and help. We might clean up garbage on the Middle Fork of the Chicago River here in Deerfield. Try to raise awareness for implementing residential solar panels. Working with the village to do a lot of the programs that villages in the area are doing. So things like getting a composting program. We helped the village renegotiate a new waste management contract with Lakeshore Recycling so that residents of Deerfield can actually compost their food in a municipal level rather than just maybe throw it away. Working with them to create programs that would allow Deerfield residents to opt into carbon neutral energy programs. So aggregated programs where their electric bill is really going towards sustainable sources like wind farms and solar panels, community solar, things like that. We're helping the village put together programs to implement charging stations and just lots of little things with a lot of different partners as we see them in our own community. When we recognize a need and things that people are interested in, then we try to help people approach ways to solve problems and get those things done. And then with that, I'll turn it over to GoGreen Highland Park because I'm sure they've got a lot to say too.
Hi, thank you so much. And thanks again to IEC and Rep. Morgan and Senator Duckworth for having us. It's really great to be here. And, I gotta just kind of piggyback on what Chris said. Go Green Illinois has just been a great resource, especially for people who don't feel like they have the ability to get into the higher level of things. But, making change in your neighborhood feels really good, and you can really have a domino effect, I think. So, Go Green Highland Park kind of started in 2015. I think we got a little more momentum once we got like a website, a little more social media. When you're volunteer dependent, things come along as people know how to do them and are willing to. So, we are up to about 10 steering committee members, and we meet every other month to kind of discuss goals, who's working on what we should expand on, things like that. We have, 600 people on our newsletter. So if there's ever something, legislatively that we can get out, you can always look to the Go Green Illinois network, and a lot of people can get that into a newsletter to, hyper local level. We are 100% grassroots. We're not officially a 501c3, which has pluses and minuses. We are able to accept donations thanks to Highland Park Community Foundation as our fiscal agent. But, not being, we have a little more political leeway at the moment, but, we're investigating maybe becoming a full nonprofit. We also have a lot of community partners. As you can see, the city, our park district, the library, we've done a lot of great programs with them, and one on the IRA for homeowners. So that was nice to pass around. The school district has been pretty responsive to us. SWALCO, Solid Waste Agency of Lake County, is really excellent. The Highland Park and Highwood League of Women Voters actually has really been very supportive of us, and the Rotary Club. They've partnered with us on a habitat program I'll talk about in a minute. And we've popped in and out of our farmers market a lot, just doing, bag share kinds of things, promoting the local farmers and businesses as well. And then I didn't touch on there, but our areas of focus as well are the clean energy, land and water conservation, youth education, and waste reduction. Next slide, please. So just a couple of our highlights. We, again, like Deerfield, got the year-round organics, and we actually learned a lot thanks to their rollout. We garnered a few pluses and minuses on how to make that happen. We've been very involved in the education on the compost rollout and the recycling at both city events, library events, park district. Pretty much we found out anyone with a bigger mailing list, we should get into their events, because then we reach even more people. At the youth level, we have zero waste lunchrooms in a few schools, and we're working to get that farther along. We try to encourage, reuse through toy swaps, promoting exchanges where we can. We've partnered to do family bike rides before. Clean energy, we have one person who's actually my husband, who's extremely passionate about clean energy. So we've done community solar subscriptions. We've done multiple EV shows. Representative Morgan has been at multiple solar tours in our backyard over and over again. And I believe Senator Morrison has been to our house as well, helping, trying to regulate building codes for EV readiness. And then had a lot of talk with our school board as they're going through major renovations to try to get more renewable energy projects. So that's great to see they're going to have solar and geothermal, and they are getting IRA money. So glad that's coming into the state. And political engagement, we, encourage people to meet with reps. We've been to Representative Morgan's office and multiple others, which is really great to have that dialogue, and we can take just about any concerns. And we also have encouraged other community members of approaches like, how do you get a hold of them? What do you say? So kind of, encouraging others to be active, because we know more than one voice coming to our representatives is really powerful. We have done an environmental candidate questionnaire for our city council races, which was really well received, actually. And then the League of Women Voters, when they were working on their forum their candidate forum, they reached out for some ideas for environmental questions. We're currently a coalition member for Vote Yes on the Lake County Forest Preserve referendum coming up. And we do have a Habitat Highland Park program, which is focused on becoming a community wildlife habitat with National Wildlife Federation. And we actually have just achieved enough points to become officially certified. So that means there's enough natural habitats in Highland Park that we are a corridor for wildlife and pollinators traveling through. They can raise young and safely eat and live here without pesticides, and they have lots of native food options. And we do a lot of beach cleanups with the Friends of the Chicago River, the Great Lakes Alliance. We always are participating in those. And our city council is part of the multi-community working group on gas-powered leaf blowers. So working to reduce usage of gas-powered leaf blowers for the overall air quality for everyone. So yeah, we're just really excited to be able to kind of have people in town connect with us and be able to make things happen right away. And people like to see things happening in their town because it kind of pushes them a little bit further, you know, in their environmental journey if they have a little success at home. And we really appreciate all of our connections with our local leaders and the opportunity to be here. So thank you.
Thank you all so much for attending today. Thank you again to our incredible co-hosts, Representative Bob Morgan, the Office of Senator Tammy Duckworth, to GoGreen Deerfield and GoGreen Highland Park for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Have a great day.